The jungle was never silent. Even at night, when the sun disappeared behind the jagged mountains of Lubang Island, when darkness swallowed the trees and turned the world into shadow, the air stayed alive. Insects screamed in endless chorus. Leaves whispered secrets to the wind. Somewhere in the distance, hidden beneath layers of green, an animal moved, slow, careful, watching. In this endless maze of vines and thorns and ancient trees, a man was still at war. His name was Hiroo Onoda. And this is the story of how a soldier fought a war for nearly 3 decades after it ended, not because he was insane, not because he was stupid, but because his training, his loyalty, and his sense of duty were so absolute that he couldn't tell the difference between obedience and obsession. This is a story about survival, about belief, and about the terrifying power of a promise that won't let you go. Hiroo Onoda was born in 1922 in Kamekawa, a small village in Japan's Wakayama Prefecture. He grew up during a time when military honor wasn't just encouraged, it was woven into the fabric of Japanese identity. To serve was to matter. To fight was to prove your worth. In 1942, at the age of 20, Onoda was conscripted into the Imperial Japanese Army. But unlike most soldiers who were sent to the front lines for combat, Onoda showed something different: intelligence, adaptability, cunning. He was selected for specialized training at the Nakano School, an elite intelligence academy that taught guerrilla warfare, sabotage, espionage, and survival. The Nakano School didn't train heroes. It trained ghosts. Students learned to live off the land, to move without sound, to strike without warning. They studied psychology, propaganda, enemy tactics. They were taught that surrender was not an option, not ever. Death before dishonor. Mission above all else. And most importantly, they were drilled with one core principle: never give up. Never surrender. Fight until your commander releases you. Onoda absorbed every lesson. He was disciplined, focused, relentless. He believed in his country, in his emperor, in the righteousness of Japan's cause. When his training ended, he was given the rank of second lieutenant and assigned to the Philippines, a strategic chain of islands that Japan desperately needed to hold against the advancing Americans. In late 1944, Onoda arrived on Lubang Island, a small, mountainous piece of land west of Manila. His orders were clear and chilling. His commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, pulled him aside and said, "You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens will come back for you. Until then, so long as one soldier remains, that soldier is to continue the mission." The mission: to conduct guerrilla warfare, to disrupt enemy supply lines, to sabotage infrastructure, and to wait, no matter how long it took, for Japanese reinforcement. Onoda nodded. He understood. He would not fail. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the war was already lost. By early 1945, American forces were crushing Japanese positions across the Pacific. The Philippines fell. Bombs rained from the sky. Radio transmissions stopped. Supply ships never arrived. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito addressed the nation in a radio broadcast, the first time most Japanese citizens had ever heard his voice. His message was simple and devastating. Japan had surrendered. The war was over. But in the mountains and jungles of Lubang Island, the war never stopped. Onoda and 3 other soldiers, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, Private Kenshichi Kozuka, and Private Yuichi Akatsu, retreated deep into the interior. They had heard rumors of surrender, but rumors were just enemy tactics. Psychological warfare. Lies designed to weaken their resolve. They would not fall for it. The 4 men became ghosts in the green. They studied every inch of the island, memorizing trails, marking water sources, identifying edible plants. They built temporary shelters hidden beneath thick canopy cover, always ready to move at a moment's notice. They rationed stolen rice, hunted small animals, ate coconuts, bananas, wild yams, and palm hearts. When food was scarce, and it often was, hunger became a 5th companion, gnawing at their stomachs day and night. Discipline kept them alive. Every morning, Onoda inspected his men. Uniforms were mended. Weapons were cleaned. The rifle, always the rifle, was treated like a holy relic, oiled and polished daily, even as the jungle tried to rust it into uselessness. At night they took turns on watch. Eyes scanning the darkness. Ears straining for footsteps. Every sound could mean death. But it wasn't just the enemy they had to survive. It was nature. Monsoon rains turned the ground into swamps. Leeches clung to their skin, bloating with blood. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds, spreading malaria and dengue fever. Snakes coiled in the underbrush. Infections festered in cuts that wouldn't heal. The jungle didn't care about loyalty or duty, it only consumed. And yet they endured. Months after the war ended, leaflets began falling from the sky. Thousands of them fluttering down like strange white leaves. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. Come out. You will not be harmed. Onoda picked one up, studied it carefully, and handed it to the others. Propaganda, he said. A trick. It made perfect sense to him. Why would the enemy tell the truth? Why would they waste resources dropping messages unless it was part of a larger psychological operation to flush out remaining soldiers? The leaflets continued. Then came newspapers. Japanese newspapers also dropped from planes. Headlines announced Japan's defeat, the American occupation, the rebuilding of Tokyo. Onoda read every word and believed none of it. These are forgeries, he explained to his men. The Americans are clever. They've studied our language, our culture. They're trying to confuse us. The others nodded. It made sense. After all, they had been trained to expect exactly this kind of deception. But doubt is a slow poison. In 1950, after 5 years of isolation, Private Yuichi Akatsu cracked. One night, while the others slept, he slipped away. He left no note, no explanation, just vanished into the darkness like smoke. When Onoda woke and realized Akatsu was gone, he assumed the worst, captured or killed. But Akatsu had surrendered. He walked out of the jungle, approached Filipino authorities, and told them there were still 3 Japanese soldiers hiding in the mountains. Search parties were organized. Loudspeakers blared messages in Japanese. Onoda, Shimada, Kazuka, the war is over. Come home. Onoda heard the voices and stayed hidden. They captured Akatsu, he told the others. They're using his voice or someone who sounds like him. We cannot trust anything we hear. In 1954, Corporal Shoichi Shimada was shot and killed during a clash with local police. The 3 soldiers had been raiding a village for rice when Filipino officers opened fire. Shimada fell, blood pooling beneath him, eyes staring at a sky he would never see change. Onoda and Kozuka buried him in a shallow grave and kept moving. Now there were 2. The years blurred together. 1955, 1960, 1965. The world outside transformed. Japan became an economic powerhouse, rebuilt from ashes into neon and steel. The Beatles played on radios. Men walked on the moon. War started and ended. But in the jungle, time stood still. Onoda and Kozuka continued their mission. They sabotaged Filipino infrastructure, burned rice stores they believed were feeding enemy troops, and engaged in occasional firefights with police and farmers. They killed approximately 30 Filipinos over the years, people they believed were enemy combatants or spies. To the outside world, they were dangerous holdouts, relics of a dead war. To themselves, they were soldiers following orders. In October 1972, Private Kenshichi Kozuka was shot dead by Filipino police during another raid. Onoda heard the gunfire, heard his friend fall, and ran. He was 50 years old. And now he was completely alone. Alone in the jungle. Alone in a war that no longer existed. Alone with nothing but his rifle, his rotting uniform, and his unbreakable orders. How does a man survive nearly 30 years of isolation? For Onoda, the answer was simple: belief. He believed in his mission with a purity that bordered on religious faith. Every dropped leaflet, every search party, every letter from his family, they were all tests of his resolve. The enemy was cunning, patient, relentless. They would say anything, forge anything to make him break. But he would not break. His daily routine became ritual. Wake before dawn. Check perimeter. Clean rifle. Scout for food. Avoid contact. Sleep lightly. Repeat. He aged, but he did not weaken. His uniform, once crisp and proud, became a patchwork of bark cloth and stolen fabric, stitched together with plant fibers. His boots disintegrated, replaced by sandals made from tree bark. His hair grew long and wild. His skin darkened under the relentless sun. But his mind stayed sharp, locked in 1944, replaying his orders like a broken record that could never stop. Villagers saw him sometimes, a shadow moving through the trees, a figure that seemed more myth than man. They called him Tong Bundak, the mountain man. Some feared him. Others pitied him. Search parties came periodically, calling his name, pleading with him to come home. He watched them from hiding, rifle ready, convinced it was a trap. His family never stopped looking for him. His brother wrote letters, which were printed on leaflets and dropped over the jungle. "Hiroo, please come home. Mother is waiting for you. The war is over. You have done your duty. It is time to rest." Onoda read them, emotion flickering across his weathered face. And then he dismissed them. They have my brother, he whispered to himself. They are forcing him to write these lies. Because if the war was truly over, if Japan had really surrendered, then what did his suffering mean? What did Shimada's death mean? What did Kozuka's blood mean? If the war was over, then he had wasted his life. So the war could not be over. It was the only truth he could accept. By the 1970s, Onoda had become an international legend, the last soldier of World War II, a man lost in time. Journalists wrote about him. Documentaries speculated. The Japanese government sent official delegations to Lubang Island, trying to coax him out. Nothing worked. Then, in February 1974, something extraordinary happened. Norio Suzuki was a 24-year-old Japanese adventurer, wanderer, and self-described hippie. He dropped out of university, traveled the world with no plan and little money, and lived by a simple philosophy: seek the extraordinary. One day someone asked him what he was looking for. "Lieutenant Onoda," he said with a grin, "a panda and the abominable snowman in that order." Most people laughed. Suzuki bought a ticket to the Philippines. He arrived on Lubang Island with a tent, a camera, and an unshakable optimism. While search parties with helicopters and trained soldiers had failed for decades, Suzuki had something they didn't. He wasn't trying to capture Onoda. He just wanted to talk. He wandered into the jungle, called out greetings in Japanese, left food at campsites and waited. And one night Onoda appeared. The two men sat beneath the stars, one from 1974, one from 1944, and talked for hours. Suzuki told him the truth. The war was over. Japan had surrendered. The emperor was alive. The country had rebuilt. There was no shame in coming home. Onoda listened politely, his face unreadable in the firelight. "I believe you are sincere," he said. "But I cannot surrender. Not to you. Not to anyone except my commanding officer." Suzuki nodded slowly. "Then I will find him." The Japanese government tracked down Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, now in his 70s, no longer a soldier but a quiet man working in a bookstore in Tokyo. They explained the situation. Taniguchi agreed immediately. In March 1974, he flew to the Philippines, traveled to Lubang Island, and walked into the jungle. Onoda saw him approaching and froze. His commander. After 30 years. Taniguchi stood before him, older, gray-haired, wearing civilian clothes. He spoke clearly, formally, with military precision. "Lieutenant Onoda, I am here to relieve you of your duties. The war has ended. Japan has been at peace for many years. You have completed your mission with honor. I now order you to lay down your arms and return home." For a long moment, Onoda stood silent. Something deep inside him, something that had been wound tight for 3 decades, finally snapped. Tears filled his eyes. He saluted. And on March 9, 1974, Hiroo Onoda emerged from the jungle. He walked out of the jungle still wearing his tattered uniform. Still carrying his rifle, a Type 99 that still functioned perfectly after 29 years. Still carrying 500 rounds of ammunition, hand grenades, and a sword. Still standing at attention, still believing even as the world stared in disbelief. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The Philippine government, which could have prosecuted him for the killings, instead granted him a pardon, recognizing him as a soldier who believed he was still at war. He returned to Japan as a hero or something like a hero. Some saw him as the ultimate symbol of loyalty and duty. Others saw him as a tragic figure, a man robbed of his life by fanatical training. Onoda himself struggled to understand the modern world. Skyscrapers, traffic lights, television, supermarkets. It was overwhelming, alien, wrong. Japan has become too comfortable, he said in interviews. People have forgotten what it means to endure. Eventually, Onoda left Japan. He moved to Brazil, where he bought land and started a cattle ranch, a life far from the jungle but still simple, still disciplined. In later years, he returned to Japan periodically to run a nature school, teaching young people survival skills, discipline, and resilience. He never apologized for what he had done. To him, he had simply been a soldier following orders. Hiroo Onoda died in 2014 at the age of 91. He had outlived the war by 69 years. He had survived the jungle. He had survived isolation. He had survived his own mind. So what do we take from this? Onoda's story is not a simple tale of heroism or madness. It's something stranger, something more uncomfortable. It's a story about the terrifying power of belief. Because Onoda wasn't stupid. He wasn't insane. He was doing exactly what he was trained to do. His loyalty was so absolute, his sense of duty so complete, that he could not allow himself to believe the war had ended. To admit the truth would have meant admitting that everything, the hunger, the fear, the deaths of his comrades, had been for nothing. And so he chose to keep fighting. He survived not because the jungle was kind, but because his mind refused to let him quit. Hiroo Onoda didn't just survive the jungle. He survived time. He survived reality. He survived belief itself. And his story remains one of the most extreme examples of human endurance, loyalty, and the double-edged sword of unwavering conviction ever recorded. Because sometimes, the hardest war to fight is the one inside your own head. And sometimes, the hardest thing to survive is letting go.